The defenses that prey have developed in order to avoid being eaten have costs associated with them. We're going to start by thinking about behavioral defenses. So in the picture here we have some meerkats, and this is what meerkats are known for. That's standing real straight upright, looking out, looking for predators, keeping an eye out. And if one of them sees a predator, then they will alert all the others that there might be a predator in the area. Well, there are obviously some costs to this. One cost is just that all the time they spend standing up there looking is time they're not doing something else. Another cost is that keeping an eye out for predators often results in lower efficiency in whatever the prey is doing. So, for example, I saw a study once where they found that the location that potential prey chose to spend their time eating grass tended to be closer to the tree line so that they could potentially escape from predators if they were attacked over into the forest. Now, that meant that they were not venturing farther out into the grassy area where there was more food available because they had this trade-off of choosing safety over efficient foraging. Additionally, if we think about our meerkats there, the real benefit of meerkats is that there's always somebody watching, that there's somebody on guard. Well, that means they need to be close to each other. That means that they're going to be experiencing increased density and all of those issues that we talked about with living in a group. Right? Closer together means increased competition, less total resources to go around, potentially more obvious predators, as all examples of costs trying to avoid being eaten. Now, let's also talk about structural defenses. Structural defenses are expensive to build. For example, in the picture here we have a porcupine. Porcupine's defense are those quills. A porcupine has, wait for it, something like 30,000 quills. Right? A huge number of quills. It takes a lot of energy and resources to build all those quills. It's a cost of trying to avoid being eaten. We can also think about the chemical defenses. Chemical defenses, such as this poison dart frog, have these toxins, and again, it takes energy, it takes materials to build those toxins. Or, in the case of the monarch butterflies, right, to steal those toxins from other things. It takes investment. And so, all defenses that organisms use involve a trade-off, involve investing to try to avoid being eaten. Now, as we think about the predators as they attempt to consume that prey, we're going to see that the predators are always evolving in response to those prey defenses. That the predators are having to evolve to get better and better and better at getting to the prey. Sometimes that coevolutionary connection between predator and prey leads to specialization, leads to predators that specialize on specific prey. In the case of our porcupine here, we could ask, well, what eats porcupines? You know, they're covered in quills. They have a specialized behavior to maximize use of the quills. If something tries to attack a porcupine, they put their face right up against a tree and then move backwards, swinging their tail back and forth so they can impale whatever they get up against with those quills. Well, it turns out there's one species that really specializes on porcupines, and that species is the fisher. Fishers are really good at capturing, killing, and consuming porcupines. They've specialized on it so that, in fact, porcupines are basically the only or one of the few prey items that most fishers eat. It's what they're really good at. In this case, it's primarily a behavioral specialization. So the fisher tries to attack the porcupine's face. Face is not covered by quills. If they can attack their face enough to get their face to where it's kind of bleeding, get them injured, then eventually they can try to get them flipped over and get a soft underbelly of the porcupine. It's what they're really good at. The quills, of course, are quite dangerous. I actually, so I had this friend who studied fissures, and he actually rediscovered fissures in New Jersey. Fissures had been gone from New Jersey for something like 100 years, and he was up in northwestern New Jersey one day, and he saw a fissure run across the road in front of his truck. And he thought, holy cow, fissures are here. And then he put up game cameras and eventually got a picture, and it was just this kind of amazing story of the rediscovery of fissures. And so he joined the graduate program, of which I was a member, and he was going to give a talk about his research on fissures. And I thought, that'll be interesting. And then he asked me to help him with it. He said, hey, I'm going to need some help, at my talk on Friday. I said, all right. And so I was thinking about it. So on the drive into campus that day, I thought, man, I wonder what Charlie needs help with. I thought, I had better something to do with porcupines, because fishers are such porcupine specialists. And so before his talk, Charlie came up to me, and he had this bag with some porcupine quills in it. I don't know if you're familiar with porcupine quills. They're basically just these long, hollow hairs, but they have a hook at the end, so that if they stab anything, they get pulled out at the same time. And so Charlie says, hey, here's the porcupine quills. He said, when I ask you to, come up and stab one of these into my cheek. He's like, get it in there. Don't, not so far that it goes all the way through, but really get it in there. So I said, all right, no problem. So during his talk, Charlie calls me up, and he gives me the porcupine quill, and I take it and I jab it into his cheek, and he spends the rest of his talk with his porcupine quill sticking out of the side of his face. And occasionally he'll pull on it, because it's got that hook on the end. So occasionally he'll pull on it and pull his cheek out. I will tell you, it was kind of crazy, but it was very effective at capturing everyone's attention. I mean, he had everybody watching and listening to what he was saying. And then at the end, of course, he had to pull this thing out, which I guess if you just have to pull out one, it's not that big of a deal. If you get a face full of quills, like a dog does when it tries to attack a porcupine, that's more serious. But he has had this one quill to pull out. Those were good times. Also, as long as we're talking about porcupine quills also basically have like an antibiotic on the quill that makes it harder for the predator to get infected. Why would the porcupine not want the predator to get infected? I mean, why are porcupines such nice guys? Why are they helping out the predator? Interesting to think about. I mean, if I'm mad at somebody, I'm going to stab them. Do I coat the knife with antibiotic first to make sure they don't get an infection? Seems like a weird thing to do. Turns out this is one of those things that's actually beneficial for the porcupine. If a predator attacks them, gets an infection, and dies, well, that means another individual, another predator, is probably going to move into that same territory. Another predator that may not be familiar with porcupines, and may also decide it wants to try to take a bite out of a porcupine. If the porcupine hurts the predator, but keeps it alive, well, then that predator has learned not to attack porcupines. So it's to the best interest of the porcupine to educate, but not kill, their predator. All right, so I want to think here now about the way predators approach figuring out what they're going to eat. Optimal foraging theory is a way that we contemplate the choosing of prey by predators, where we ask the question, well, what should a predator eat? Right? There's a lot of possibility. There's a lot of animals out there in the world that could potentially be consumed. How does a predator choose which of those it's going to consume and which it's not? Well, we're going to say that there's going to be a couple of things that drive this. One is energy input. So a predator has to spend time searching for and handling prey. All right, so the picture I have here is this really spectacular bird called a bat falcon. And as a bat falcon sitting there on its perch, surveying the countryside, it may see a variety of different prey items. Those different prey items are going to require different amounts of energy input. Right? If it happens to look out and see, I don't know, a deer, Well, that's pretty big for a bat falcon. That'd be a huge amount of energy input for the handling to try to actually subdue, kill, and consume a deer. And so a bat falcon is going to take that energy input into consideration. There's also search time involved. For any prey that a predator is going to eat, it has to find it first. Right? A predator is going to be thinking about, now when we say thinking about here, we don't necessarily mean the predator is going to be doing mental math. But from an ecological standpoint, a predator has to be considering that energy input versus the energy gain, what it gets out of that prey. Right? So we could kind of write that out as the search and handling versus the energy content, how much they actually get. So I want to think about that difference in a couple of different predators here. On the left, we have a bird called an eastern kingbird, species of flycatcher found around here, pretty common. Eastern kingbirds mainly eat insects. The amount of search and handling time for an insect is pretty small, right? That if that kingbird finds an insect, well, it flies out, it grabs it, it swallows it, and it goes back to the perch to look for more. On the other hand, the energy content is also pretty small. Each insect doesn't contain much, and so that eastern kingbird is going to have to eat a lot of them to make up a meal. On the other hand, look at the lion on the right. A lion has a lot of search and handling put into a prey item. Right? They may spend all day stalking a prey item. On the other hand, if they're successful at capturing it, there's a lot of energy in that prey. Right? So if we think about the decisions that those two predators are making, they're very different. If you're the kingbird and you go out and try to catch something and are unsuccessful, yeah, no big deal. Wait 10 seconds, something else will fly along. If you're the lion and you go out and try to catch something and are unsuccessful, well, you may have just spent a whole day. You may not eat for an entire day when you're unsuccessful. So optimal foraging theory asks how organisms choose what to eat and how they try to maximize the amount of energy that they take in. And so we're actually going to represent that with a really simple equation. And that simple equation is just the amount of energy that an individual gets out of its food divided by the search plus handling time. Right? So for the eastern kingbird, the amount of energy per food item, maybe they only get, 10 calories out of an insect that they eat, but maybe there's only, 5 seconds of searching and 5 seconds of handling, and so they end up getting about a calorie per second, 10 calories per 10 seconds. On the other hand, if we look at the lion, maybe it's getting 15,000 calories out of the food that it eats, but on the other hand, maybe it takes 15,000 seconds to capture, kill, and consume it. Right? So both of these predators, and predators in general, are going to have to make this decision about what to eat. And if they encounter a prey item, they have to ask, should they consume it? If something new appears before them, should they make the decision to try to eat it or not? Right? When that kingbird looks out and sees a new insect flying along, should it try to eat it? When the lion is out in the wild and sees a prey item in the distance, it has to make the decision, should it be consumed, or should I ignore it and wait for the next thing? That's the basic idea of optimal foraging theory, is that predators are going to maximize the amount of calories per time in their decisions about what to consume.